the Growing Your Own Money podcast. Dean Thorpe, a CEO and financial advisor, and his son James Thorpe, a social media marketing business owner, sit down and discuss all things to do with money, goals, business, and the markets.
Okay, so today, a very interesting topic, a topic which is interesting but also logical and sort of systematic. It's a systematic principle, and that is the principle and the power of compounding, whether that be financial or whether that be in day-to-day life, and sort of the power of being consistent and how that can compound. So initially, I wanted to look into how compounding can impact your investments and your finances. From your perspective, how do you see that?
I remember some years ago I was doing some work in the Middle East, and it was a national bank, and they were looking at how they could develop their product development people into basic financial advisors, financial planners. So they were kind of used to just working in the bank, selling their bank products. And what they had identified is that they could add more value by sitting down with their customers and helping them to understand a bit more about the principles of money. And I remember this just blew their mind, the power of compound interest. And I set up a compound interest calculator, and we showed the difference between taking your interest, your income, over a 20-year period or longer, and reinvesting your interest or income over that same period. And it's just mind-boggling. It's just quite incredible. And that's just the basics of compounding. If you look at a developed world stock market, and the returns that a developed world stock market will have, they're made up of income and capital returns on the money. You take the S&P 500, the main US index of listed companies, the biggest 500 companies on that index. If you look at that over a 100-year period, the return over the last 100 years up to the end of December has been in excess of 10% per annum. If you look at the makeup of that 10% per annum over that 100-year period, that assumes that any dividends that have been paid on the shares have been reinvested. So you haven't taken the dividends out, you've reinvested those dividends. So what element of that 10% per annum has dividends had an impact on? And it's as high as 40%. So of the 10% per annum that you've finished up generating a return on average over 100 years, 4% of it has been a consequence of reinvesting your income. So that's the power of the compound interest. Because in the first year it doesn't seem to make a big difference, but then the 4% is on top of the 4%, is on top of the 4%, is on top of the 4%. And over time, the longer the time frame, the bigger the impact.
Definitely.
And it might be worth us putting some kind of chart or little supplementary video alongside this podcast, just to show the power, just to show the impact that it can have. Because if you take the simple principle, the simple interest element, you've got your pound, you take the interest, in 100 years' time, you've still got your pound. Interest on interest on interest on interest on top of that pound, you're looking at a series of noughts after 100 years. That's the difference that you're looking at in terms of compounding from a financial perspective. Now apply that to personal development, and you've got a similar sort of thing, haven't you?
Definitely. I think just looking at it from like a gym, if you're in the gym, if you're lifting weights, if you're trying to run further, the more you do it, the more you stay consistent, the more it compounds and the further and further you can go. So often you'll see like people who can start off doing maybe like a couch to 5k.
Yeah.
Well, at one stage they weren't able to get to 5k, but as a result of being consistent, their progress has compounded to a level where they're now able to do the 5 kilometre, and probably from that point they'll be able to get to the 10 kilometre mark faster than they were able to get from the 0 to the 5 kilometre mark.
Yeah.
And I think the same goes in sports. So whether it's football, I mean, I do some football coaching, so maybe when I'm working one-to-one, looking at repetition, trying to pick out the little things which we can do better in order to have that big return from one small thing, and how that compounds over time. And yeah, just the reps, putting in the reps like you would in the gym, lifting weights, repetition, because consistency compounds over time. So if you do anything, if you stay consistent, you're going to get better. It's almost nailed on. Unless you're doing something completely incorrect, you're going to get better at it through that consistency of repetitions.
And the challenge in our experiences is that sometimes those repetitions and the results you seem to be getting appear to be quite small. So if you invest the first couple of years, it's not done 10%. No, it might not have done. But it's building small to begin with and starting to get some momentum. Exactly the same principle with personal development, in the gym, in sport. Initially, it might take quite a bit more effort and you might not see the rewards.
Yeah.
But apply the same principle to putting a rocket into space. How much power, effort and energy does it take to push against gravity to get that rocket off the ground? But then once it's up, a few miles up in the air, gravity has less of an impact. The power was all at the outset. You've got the momentum. You're moving in the right direction. Exactly the same principle with money, relationships and personal development. You can start to make some big strides then, can't you, once you've got that initial effort off the ground.
Yeah.
Momentum puts such another element, another layer.
Definitely, like a sprinter.
To it.
Small steps to begin with, and then they start opening the stride out, and they push on, and they're up to max speed, and now they're away. Yeah.
And along the way, there will be quick wins where you see some big gains. So the couch to 5k, first up, it might be almost a walk rather than a run.
Yeah.
But then you get to a point where you get up off the couch and you run straight away. You walk out the door and you're running. Where before you're having to walk, run a little bit, stop, get your breath back, walk into a run. Before you know it, before you realise it, you're just running.
Yeah.
And it's important to recognise when you reflect back that yes, it does feel hard and it feels like small steps, but always make sure to look and reflect back on the journey and see how far you've come, because that can help spur you on to the next stage.
Definitely, yeah. It's amazing how it works. And I think it's also important not to get like demotivated if you are in that place where you're feeling like you've not got any results. Well, actually, if you just stick at it that a little bit longer, there's like a saying that I like, which is do one more. If you do anything else, just do one more day, give it one more day. And then you keep doing that, and that compounds over time, and you'll get somewhere with it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I remember one gym I went to many years ago, the instructor said, do repeats to fail.
Yeah.
And I found that initially a strange expression. So you do as many repeats as you can at a lower level of weight until you fail.
Yeah.
In other words, until you're not able to do any more.
Yeah.
And that messed with my head at the time. So it's like, why would I want to do it to fail? But then if you reframe that and recognise what the instructor was attempting to get you to do, it was do as many as you possibly could.
Yeah.
So that next time you could do one more. Mm-hmm. And then the time after that you could do one more again.
Yeah.
And I think you can apply that kind of principle to so many different things in life.
Definitely.
In order to keep you going.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might feel like you have had some quick wins, you keep doing it, and it kind of levels off.
Yeah, like a little bit of a plateau.
You reach that plateau and you think, where am I heading? Good time to review things, reflect again, but also be patient, because that's the time to stick at it, to work through it, maybe adapt, change a couple of things. Because if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. I remember we talked about that in a previous episode. This might be one of those times. So yes, try a couple of tweaks, a couple of minor changes, see if that improves things, and then on to the next level. Sky's the limit.
Definitely.
I've been reflecting on what's out there at the minute. And I'm fairly confident that these days, not necessarily today, but these days, that generally speaking, the last kind of 20, 30 years, but I think it's still true of today, there's never been a better time to step out and do something.
Yeah.
Whether that's teaching yourself a new skill, whether that's setting up a business if you've been made redundant recently, whether that's setting up a side hustle, a sideline, and a secondary income alongside something work-wise that you're already doing, whether that's going to a gym or even not going to a gym and doing some kind of exercise yourself, but with the aid of an instructor that could be through video, an app.
Yeah. Oh, there's loads of different ways, like you say. And I think that's a lot of it is the internet, isn't it? The power of internet and the digitization of breaking borders. You can go and have an instructor from the US or a guitar teacher from the US teach you a skill. It's literally that it's become possible as a result of the internet, and like you say, now is the best time to start getting involved in those sorts of things. Definitely.
Do you think people are getting distracted though by technology? And how?
Well, definitely. I mean, you only have to look at the number of people that you just see sat scrolling, or you hear of people sat scrolling. I think every year phone screen time is going up by like, I don't know the figures, but it's definitely going up and up and up and up. And it's something which you have to like we spoke about in an earlier episode, you have to consciously think about, okay, this is becoming a habit. Is this a habit a good habit or not habit, or a bad habit for me? How do I limit the screen time? So there's sort of two sides to it. You can either utilize the technology in order to benefit you and push you forwards, or you can use it as like sometimes it's good to have it to wind down and as a bit of entertainment, but it can also distract you, like you've mentioned, a fair amount. So I like to look at it two sides as in terms of like the social media and TikTok and YouTube. You can either be a creator who goes out and creates the content, or you can be the consumer who consumes the content. And often the consumer is the person that's, if we're talking about in a monetary sense, they're not making the money. The creators, the people, they're making the money off you watching that thing that they've created. So definitely, so a lot of distractions, but more opportunities if you know where to look and if you don't get distracted.
So are you using those stats in your social media marketing?
I guess not.
Recognising
it not probably enough, to be fair. But I have mentioned it in sort of like LinkedIn posts and those sorts of things which I've been doing. But definitely something to actually touch on a little bit more, because I'd have to research what the actual fact is, but it's like it's between 4 and 6 hours a day is the average screen time for people around my age, which is bonkers.
Which compounded, given that this podcast is around compounding, think about the compounding hours and the impact that's having on those individuals. Where historically, what were we doing? Were we reading a book? Were we consuming television?
probably out, being active.
Yeah.
Particularly, this is another thing as well, like young children. Now they're all, like, it's good because they can all sit on their Xbox and put the headset on and then they're with each other, but they're not going out as much. And it shows with obesity levels rising, those sorts of things. So definitely there are, as always, two sides to the equation. It's just finding yourself on the right side of that equation, where you're using it to your advantage.
The negative power of compounding in action.
Definitely.
In effect.
Definitely.
The information is there as well, isn't it? So the device providers do actually report back to you how much screen time you're using, so you can recognise it.
Yeah.
And you can set limits for yourself and your family.
Yeah.
Use in a positive way.
Yeah.
Because we've done that between us.
Exactly, yeah. Especially when I was like younger and I'd go on the Xbox more. It was actually, maybe at the time you think, oh, I wish I could play a little bit longer, but actually, you don't get that much out of it. You'd be better off just having a little bit of a break and going and doing something else.
Yeah.
Which at the time, it's not always easy to see, but once, like you say, once you zoom out and you get that compounding effect, it then becomes crystal clear as to why it is. So just taking the phone screen time, you think they're doing like 6 hours a day, add that up over a year, that's days and weeks of time spent looking at your phone. It's like, what?
Yeah.
That's mad.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Indeed. Let's finish with a positive then. One of the goals you set yourself was to read daily.
Yeah.
A physical book, not a digital book.
Yeah.
So you'd set yourself how many pages a day?
30 a day.
30 pages.
Yeah.
You started at 15 though, didn't you?
So I do 15 in the morning, and then throughout the day I try and get them over 15 pages.
Okay. So minimum 15 with a target of 30 pages a day.
Yeah.
And how's that going?
Yeah, coming along well, to be fair. I stick. It's actually the first thing that I do. So I'm in my calendar. It's the first thing on there. Read 15 pages, and then like assess my goals. So I always get the 15 in, and then it's just trying to find the time, which there's always time. Yeah. Sometimes I'll distract myself, as we spoke about. Yeah. But there's always time to get those extra 15 pages in, to reach that goal. Yeah, and it was a goal of reading 30 books in 2024.
Okay.
That's my larger aim.
So yeah, the power of compound. How many books are you?
I think I'm through 7.
And we're at the end of March. So you've already read 7 books.
Yeah.
That's brilliant, isn't it? That's the power of compound in terms of educating yourself, in effect, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because not only have you created a positive daily 1, 2, 3 habit with a little goal of a few pages, that's then developed into a book, a number of books, and the amount of positive information you must be taking in by doing that.
Definitely.
Is really good.
And like you say, it's that compounding. Imagine you read 100 books on that subject, the knowledge that you're going to get from those 100 books of just taking that time.
Yeah.
And then also, it's not just the compounding in terms of how many books you're reading, but it's also the compounding of the information. So you're extracting all that value, all that extra information. How does that information then compound in your work and in your in your work, in your life as a whole, in your relationships, in your investments? How does that new knowledge that you're gaining then move you forward and compound over time?
Yeah.
I think it's amazing.
Yeah. So compound isn't just about interest, folks. It's about what we can apply right across our lives, isn't it?
Definitely.